Hey songwriters, welcome back to another video here at Home Songwriting. This time around, it's a recording of one of our live workshops that you can join in our meetup group. The link is in the description. So if you'd like to join our next live workshop, be sure to sign up, RSVP. It's all free, but let's jump in and learn about some harmony. Let's go. So today our topic is harmony, and right alongside of that is groove. So we've talked a lot in other workshops about lyrics. We've talked about melody. Today we're talking about harmony and kind of the groove behind songwriting. So we're going to really give you a sense of what are the tools that are available and how can you use them in your own songwriting. So I wanted to start off today. I saw an interview with Jack Antonoff. So I know some of you may be familiar with Jack, but he is a pretty prolific songwriter, works with a lot of different artists. Some little known artists like Taylor Swift, Lana Del Rey. He works with Lord. He's worked with Pink. He has his own group called Bleachers. And there's a number of other people he's worked with, but he had some really great sort of just tips that I wanted to share. He says that bad ideas in songwriting help pave the way for good ones. So
knock, knock.
Don't be afraid to have bad ideas or explore bad ideas, because those pave the road for the really good things. Also, he says, report from where you're at. So that kind of means write about what you know and what you've really experienced and what sort of emotions you really understand. And he says basically get closer to you in your writing and let the universe in. So that kind of means just kind of let it flow a little bit, and just if you get an idea, kind of run with it. And then also spend some time, we talked about this in our hook writing workshop, but really spend some time figuring out what ideas can be expanded and what ideas are really worth turning into a full song. Also, we're all better if we do our own style of art. So he says we should embrace being different and not totally fitting in. So not trying to copy other people. And he also says if you don't get weird feedback, you're not being as original. So sometimes you have to push the boundaries a little bit. And he also says nothing is 100% original, which I think is true. All art is based on something that has come before it. So when we think about songwriting, a great song is really one that gives a listener an emotional experience that they would like to experience again, which means re-listening to the song. So our goal, and great songwriters know like which tools to try to get closer to this goal. And songwriters try and try and try, because it's impossible to know exactly what's going to connect perfectly with the audience. So it's all a little bit of trial and error. You know, you talk to a lot of people who have gotten cuts or they've written hit songs, and sometimes they will tell you that they had no idea that their hit was actually going to be a hit, because you can't really predict it. But what you can try to do is try to be in control of the emotional experience that your listener is having, and try to learn how to communicate specific emotions through structure, through tools, and through your songwriting. So again, just to kind of, you know, I think I say this in every workshop, but there's really 4 elements of a song. And that comes down to lyrics, melody, harmony, which is the chords, and then your groove. So every song has some combination of these, and you can use those elements to kind of sculpt your message and to sculpt your song. So the thing about the musical part, when you take lyrics out of the picture, melody, harmony, and groove, which are more the musical parts, they carry a huge amount of emotion. And Andrea Stolpe, one of my instructors through Berklee, and someone who a lot of you have probably seen on other workshops that we've done, she says that the emotion of your lyrics will never outweigh the emotion of your music. So the importance of the chords that you're selecting, the importance of the style that you're playing in, all of those things are ultra important. And it's not just the quality of the lyrics, because the lyrics are actually one of the final things that your listener probably actually focuses on. The music hits their emotion, the lyrics kind of hit their logic. So it's something that I see a lot of newer songwriters that they really focus a lot on the lyrics and they kind of just zip past the musical part, which is definitely not always wise. So, open discussion here. What does groove mean to you? So, what does groove mean to you when you think about groove? And you can raise your hand or put it in the chat.
To me, that just seems the rhythm, the steady rhythm of the entire song, whether it changes within the bridge or whether it changes throughout the song or not. It's to me, it's the basic rhythm. I don't know if that's common nowadays or not. I may be old school.
Yeah, no, that's definitely right too. Ron says it's the marriage between the drums, bass, and the rhythm. Also correct. Anybody else want to chime in or kind of talk about groove? I think sometimes when you hear the word groove, you think of like 70s funk bands, or at least I think of like 70s funk bands and things. But in the context of songwriting, and this could be any genre, the groove really means what Mark had said, where it's kind of the rhythm that you're playing in or the style that you're playing in. So if you are playing a guitar, you know, the groove might be a picking pattern, or it might be a strumming pattern, or like if you're playing piano, it may be um you know, are you playing an arpeggio, or are you playing like just block chords, or what does that look like? So all of that fits into the concept of groove. And groove is really a way, again, of communicating some form of emotion to your listener, and also creating a sense of movement within a piece or within a song to create contrast. We've talked about this in a lot of other workshops. So those of you who are new, go on to the at homesongwriting.com YouTube channel, and you'll kind of see where we talk a lot about contrast. But groove really is kind of what holds all of the other stuff together. Susan in the chat says she thinks of groove for the voice as how you put feelings in the presentation. Absolutely. Like the way a vocalist sings on top of the other instruments can definitely be a groove. Emily says it's meter, tempo, rhythm. Absolutely. So when you think about groove, all of you are really on the nose. I mean, you really all kind of hit it on the hit the nail on the head. So really the elements of groove come down to tempo. So is your song slow? Is it medium or like mid tempo? Is it an upbeat song? Is it a fast song? How does that tempo support the emotion of your idea or your lyric? So tempo is something to take into consideration. Also the feel of the song, which is really the style or like the genre. So is it a pop song? Is it a country song? Is it a rock song? Again, this may vary depending on the type of song that you're writing. You know, some songwriters write across multiple genres, and I think some genres fit different concepts and different styles. If you're a performing songwriter and you're kind of your own recording artist, you may kind of fit into one style, but you also can take in different pieces of other genres as well. But it's interesting to think about writing a song and thinking like, oh, this probably might be a rock song more than, you know, the singer-songwriter type of a song that I was thinking. So the genre and the feel is something to consider. Also, part of a groove is the rhythmic level. So this is the length of the notes. Are you playing at like an eighth note pattern? Is it a quarter note pattern? Are you playing mostly 16th notes? Kind of what is the rhythmic momentum of the groove? Grooves are also created from rhythmic ideas or motifs. So that would be like a distinctive pattern within a groove. You would hear that like in a, for instance, like a shuffle beat where it's like that would be like a rhythmic motif or kind of a distinctive pattern. And the other thing is riffs. Sometimes there's a riff or like a little repeated motif that fits into a groove as well. And all of these things can be used to communicate various levels of emotion. So if you were writing a sad song, more than likely you're probably not going to have it a fast tempo. You're probably not going to have a lot of faster, rhythms. It's probably going to be more mellow. It's probably going to be, just kind of fitting that feel. And when your idea matches the music like that, that's the concept of prosody, which we've talked about in other workshops as well. So prosody is when it's kind of the way that the words and the music marry together and communicate emotion. So before we go into kind of the harmony tools, I wanted to give you kind of a foreshadow of what we're going to be talking about today. And also just to give you a review of some of the lyric and melody tools that we've already covered in some of the other workshops, because this, again, what I talked about in the beginning is as you're writing songs and you get stuck, these are tools that you can use to think about, well, what can I do going forward? So just to recap, your lyric tools, you can control the number of lines, you can control the length of the lines, you can control the rhythm and the meter of your lines, you can control the rhyme scheme, you can control the rhyme types, and then you also obviously can control the content. So are you writing more concrete sense-based language, or are you writing abstract lines? On the melody side, you have kind of the same thing. You have number of phrases, you have the length of the phrases, you also have melodic shapes, which we talked about last time. You have the rhythm of the notes and the space between the notes and the rests. You also have pitch range that you can play with, and then also where the phrases start in relationship to the downbeat. So are your phrases front heavy? Are they back heavy? What does that look like? Now, today, we're going to focus on the harmony tools. So your harmony tools are the chord color or the chord type. You also have key colors, which are the feel and kind of the color that a key has. You can control the number of chords. You can control the length of your progression. Is the progression 2 chords? Is it 4 chords? Is it 8 chords? Is it some other number? You can control also how often you change chords and also the rhythm that they're played. So how often the chords change, are you changing chords every measure? Are you changing chords twice in a measure? Are you changing every 2 measures? What does that harmonic momentum look like? And then also you can change the order of the chords and have them be in a different order to create emotion and contrast. So any questions on all of that we just covered before we move on? Perfect. So chords and chord progressions. So a chord in music is really a harmonic set of pitches that consist of multiple notes that are heard as if sounding simultaneously. So obviously you don't have to play all of the notes in a chord simultaneously for it to be a chord, but for a lot of purposes, arpeggios and broken chords, those are also considered chords. So a chord is really a combination of harmonic pitches that go together to create kind of a simultaneous sound. And then a chord progression is really just a succession of chords or I guess, a pattern of chords or a list of chords that are played in succession. So a chord progression is really just exactly what it sounds like. It's a progression of chords. So one of the things that you'll hear a lot when you talk to songwriters, especially like in Nashville, where a lot of people know the chords, but they don't necessarily follow a lot of music theory. And that's the thing is, I think music theory starts to scare a lot of people because they think like, oh, it's complicated and I have to know math and like there's all these things. But really you just have to kind of know the basics of what's happening within the chords. And in Nashville, a lot of times they use the number system, which means they're numbering the degrees of the scale. So an easy scale to look at is the key of C. There's no sharps, no flats. The notes are C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. So the note is numbered by the degree of the scale. So C is your root note. That's the first note. So that's 1. D is your 2. E is 3. F is 4. G is 5. A is 6. And then B is 7. So if you break that into the chords, you have the Roman numerals down here that are the 1, 2, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, 5 major, 6 minor, and then the 7 diminished. So they use the numbers so they can quickly transpose to any key. But a good way to think, if you hear someone say play the 1, 4, and the 5, that's just playing the root, the 4, and the 5 of the scale. And in any major scale, your 1, 4, and 5 are the major chords. The 2, 3, and 6 are the minor. And then your 7 chord is a diminished chord. And we'll go through kind of what each of those chord types means as well. So any questions on the Nashville number system or how those degrees of the scale work? Awesome. So there are really 4 common chord colors that show up in what I would call like commercial songwriting or singer-songwriter songwriting, or just maybe we could say popular songs, really in any genre. There's really 4 colors that show up the most. So these are good places to start within your songwriting toolbox or your palette. So the first color is your major chord. So that's the root, a major third, and then a fifth, or the fifth of the scale. So that would be the 1, 3, 5. So I'm playing the C chord. So this is your major color, and hopefully you can hear this a little bit. What emotion do you get when you hear this major sound?
Happy.
Happy? Sure. Susan says bright.
I think I'm getting mixed emotions.
Mixed?
Yeah.
That definitely, I mean, if that's what you're hearing. But yeah, a lot of people would say major sounds happy, it sounds positive. Adam says it sounds it's resolved, it's grounded, it's home. Veronica says stable. Yeah, so all of those adjectives that you're using to describe that chord also can be used to describe your emotional content of your lyric. So when you're writing songs, think about what is the topic that I'm saying and what is the emotion that the character is feeling in the song, or what emotion do you want the singer to deliver? So if you want to deliver a very positive message, a very resolved message, something that's very stable, you're probably wanting to lean towards that major chord color. Now, the next color is minor. What does that feel like to you?
Dad.
Sad? Sure. Anybody else? Susan says worrisome. That's a cool adjective. Paul says moody. Paul Peterson says moody. Paul Beckerman says unsure. Brianna says lost. So it's interesting to hear chords on their own because they definitely do have a color. And again, some of these adjectives that people are using, write these down. So if you are writing a song about feeling a little bit lost, you could maybe focus on using some minor chords instead of the major chords to deliver that message. The next type of chord that's very common is what we would call a power chord, which is really just what you'll also see as what's called a 5 chord. So like it would be like C5, which is basically just your root and your 5. These chords are used a lot in rock and pop music because there's no third. So it creates kind of it has a similar sound to like a major chord, but it's like it's more stable and it's just more sure of itself. And Adam says it's metal, which yeah. So it's a lot of rock songs like they'll use power chords because it just has a very kind of just a different sound to it. And the thing about power chords is since they don't have a third, they can be used in multiple keys. So they don't establish a key necessarily because there's no third that's happening. So for instance, if I played like a C5, an F5, and a G5, since we're starting on the C, you would assume that we're in the key signature of C, but we could actually be in, the key of F. We could be in the key of B flat. We could really be in a lot of different keys because the third isn't helping us establish the key, which is getting a little bit deep into music theory. So we don't want to go too deep into that. But Paul Beckerman says they're easier to play on the guitar. Absolutely. That's a lot of why rock songs have them, because a lot of people who started rock bands, they might only know a couple of chords. So that's what they start with. Adam says the melody outlines the harmony instead. Definitely can be that. The next chord color that we have is a 7 chord. So that's the root, the major third, the 5th, and then flat 7. What emotion does that give you? Adam says unstable. Excuse me. Happy feeling, but needing resolution. Curious. Yeah, and 7 chords. Ooh, I like Paul's something's coming. Ron says it makes you ask what's next. Yeah, it's definitely an unstable chord. And 7 chords are used a lot, and we'll talk about the different key colors, but 7 chords are used a lot in blues. So you'll get a lot of like so if you're writing something that has that kind of bluesy, unstable, some people might say sultry kind of feel, then leaning towards some 7 chords is a good way to do that. So the next thing we're going to talk about is really the concept of keys, and then keys are going to lead us into talking about modes. So I know a lot of you, and Scarlett talked about this, where she said, a lot of people write songs with 3 chords, the 1, 4, and the 5. You can write, millions of songs off of that. But I think if you expand the vocabulary that she's talking about and what Paul had mentioned in the chat, the key here is to really experiment and try things. And again, use these different options that are available to you to see what works best for the song that you're trying to write. Because the process, the tools are going to be the same, but the process isn't going to be the same with every song that you write. So knowing the tools and where to go is very important. So a key, when you think about a key in its general sense, a key is really a set of notes that tend to pull to one note or pull toward the tonic or the root of that key. So that's usually the one or the first degree of whatever key that you're in. So popular key colors, we talked about chord colors, but there's also sounds and colors that different keys have. So a major key, which is based on the major scale, or what we would call the Ionian mode, or the first degree of the scale, has a major sound or key color to it. It sounds bright, it sounds happy, it sounds resolved, it sounds sunny. Then you have your minor key color, which is based on the natural minor scale, which is the Aeolian mode, or the sixth degree of the scale. That has a more mysterious and dark, maybe even sad tone to it when you're playing in a minor key. Mixolydian, which is the fifth degree of the scale, that mode is popular in rock songs, R&B. It has a bright sound to it, but it also has a little bit of kind of an unsettled, kind of like exotic feel to it. And I'll show you some examples of these songs, and you'll hear these different colors. Dorian, which is built from the second degree of the scale, that is built around a minor chord, but it has a few more jazzy tones to it. And then you have your blues key color, which is built from either the major or the minor blues scales, which has a more unsettled bluesy sound. So just to go through these modes from a scale perspective here. So major key, if we were in C major, turn this back up here. So that key would be so that has the kind of typical do re mi like key color that we're used to. Minor, if we went to C minor, now that has this kind of color to it. So do you feel how that difference, it gives you a different feeling? Now, if we were in C mixolydian, that would sound like this. It sounds mostly major, but we get to the flatted seventh here. That adds kind of that mystery to it. And then Dorian, if we were doing C Dorian, that would sound like this. So that sounds pretty minor, but it has a different just has a little bit of a different feel to it. And then blues, if we had a C blues, C major blues, that would sound like. Now, if we had minor blues, you've got those blues notes in there. So that's the kind of how the different popular key colors sound. But let's listen to some popular examples so you get a sense of songs that you can maybe associate with these different modes and the different key colors. So a great song to think of when you're thinking of a major key is Just the Way You Are by Bruno Mars. So we'll listen to part of this song, and this is a good example of a song that's really standard in a major key. So that song, the Bruno song, is definitely in F major. So that's it's very upbeat. That is what a major key or a major mode would sound like. And then a minor chord example, a song that's in a minor chord, and I think this is in B flat minor. This would be the song Part-Time Lover by Stevie Wonder. This is a minor sounding song, but a lot of times people think of minor as being more slow, but this is an example of using minor sounds in more of an upbeat groove. So do you hear how that song, being in a minor key, it sounds much different than what the Bruno song sounded like that had that major key color? And I know that in the chat, CJ had asked, how do you establish these different modes? And that's something that we're going to get to next. Once we sort of know kind of what they sound like, then we'll talk about how you can write in these different modes or how you think about it. Brian, you had your hand raised?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. My question is, all right. So I have a chord progression that starts off on a 5, 2, 4, and 1. Can you do a verse starting on a 5?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're starting on you said it was 5, what did you say that progression was?
5, 2, 4, 1.
So kind of that progression.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can start a verse in that progression. That would actually be, since you're starting on the 5th degree of the scale, that's actually in Mixolydian. So that's you're writing in a mode at that point, because
Okay.
you're hitting the 5 and the 4 chord in there, which in order to establish the Mixolydian mode, that 4 chord is what sort of gives us the sense that we're in that key, or in that mode. So that would be starting a song in a Mixolydian, and you can have your different sections be in different modes. So, you may start on the 5th degree of the scale and have a Mixolydian verse, but then in your chorus, you may go to like a minor chorus, or you may go to a major chorus, or it might be a Dorian chorus. Like you can add different colors in different sections, and you can jump around even within similar sections too and do some interesting modulations, but that's getting more advanced too.
And you would put a Mixolydian scale with that?
So you're playing in so when we're talking about modes, we're playing in a key signature. So if you were, let's say your song is in G, right? You're starting, or I mean in C major. So the 5 would be the G.
Right.
You're in the Mixolydian mode, but the key signature is the same as C major. So there's no sharps and no flats within the G Mixolydian mode.
Okay.
It gets a little, it takes some time to kind of understand it, and there's some music theory experts that probably explain it more concisely than I do, because I just have kind of an understanding. But yeah, so if you're starting on that 5 and you're playing that progression, you're playing in a key signature, but you're actually in a mode, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Danny, you had your hand raised as well.
Wait, is this a hard and fast rule about the first chord always defining the key? Because I also have a song where, at least towards the end, the verses all start on the chord corresponding to the Mixolydian mode, but the chord that the song feels like it naturally resolves to actually corresponds to the Ionian mode.
So your mode is established by what starts the section. So you could have a section being in Mixolydian, but it feels like it resolves to the Ionian. But if you're starting that section with the 5 chord and you're playing the chords that are in that key signature, technically you're in that mode, if that makes sense. So that's how a mode is established, is by what starts the progression and what chords you're hitting. If you're hitting the other chords within that mode somewhere in the progression. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Yeah. Brian, did you have another question, or do you just have your hand still up?
No, I'm good. Thanks, man.
Cool. CJ, I saw you raise your hand as well. Did you have a question?
I raised it and then I quickly lowered it. I'm a little confused, but I think you'll get to it. I'm just wondering, the modes are built not from a major scale, I'm guessing. Like the minor chord is its own scale, the blues chord is its own scale, right? Created a different way than the major scale.
I will show you a chart actually in just a couple minutes that will
Okay.
probably make more sense
Okay.
to you.
Okay, thank you.
And that's where there's a difference between, you're in a scale, right? You're in a minor scale, but that minor scale is actually the same key signature as a corresponding major. It's just how you think about it, if that makes sense. It's just
Okay.
I'll show you. I'll show
Okay.
you.
Okay, thank you.
And just so you guys know, modes are super complicated to explain, but they're not that complicated in practice.
Okay, thank you.
Whoops. So now we're
like
gonna
your
talk.
T-shirt, Chad.
Oh, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So next song we're gonna listen to is in Mixolydian. So this song is starting on the 5, it goes to the 4, and then it goes to the 1. So it's really based around that root note of the 5. So it's this is a great way to remember what Mixolydian sounds like. This is Born This Way by Lady Gaga. So that has a very Mixolydian sound to it. Ron says a 70s riff. Kind of, yeah. A lot of rock songs from like the 60s and 70s used Mixolydian because it had a little bit of a rebellious kind of feel to it. And it's really like, it sounds major, but it has some more grit to it. Is a kind of a way to think about the Mixolydian. Yeah, and people say that like this song sounds like Madonna. The thing is it's in the same mode. Like these songs are so, they are so like the mode is so strong that people say the song sounds so similar because it's the mode that people are hearing. Susan says, in a word or two, what would I say that encapsulates that? Do you mean the feeling like the feeling of kind of making it sound a little rebellious? Is that what you mean, Susan? Yeah, so with Mixolydian, so just to play, let's say we're in G major, right? So if we played the G major scale, that scale sounds like, but the Mixolydian, the G Mixolydian scale has a flatted 7. So it sounds like, so it's one note, it's like one note different that causes it to have that sound. And when you go from a G major chord to the so G major or G Mixolydian is the 5 of the key signature of C major, and then you could, the chord that has that flatted 7th in it is the 4 chord, or the F. So if you just, has a solid Mixolydian sound. My mama told me when I was young, she said, da na 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 na. Da 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 na 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 da 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 na 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 na. So it's really about how you should think about it as songwriters is really you don't have to always start on the one of whatever major key you're in. The idea is to experiment with starting on different chords in your key to figure out what has the right sort of emotion. So the next key color that we'll listen to is Dorian, which sounds kind of minor, but it has more of a jazzy thing to it. If you want to think of a really popular Dorian song, the song Moon Dance, I don't remember who, I'm going to draw a blank on the group right now, but Van Morrison, there we go. That's in Dorian. This song is also in Dorian. So listen to it, how it has kind of a, and Dorian is used a lot in jazz. So it has kind of a jazzy minor thing to it. So hear how that has, it has just a different feel to it. Susan said she realized that it reminds her of Sting. Yeah, Sting is like an artist that experiments with modes and modulations and things all the time. So Sting is a great artist that doesn't just write in major or minor keys. You know, if you want to definitely expand how your songs can sound different from a lot of other songwriters, I think writing in modes is one way to do it, because a lot of people just don't take the time to think about it. So, and that's the key. Like, we're not going to make you guys experts in this little workshop today. Like, this is something that hopefully this plants a seed for you to maybe look into, getting some other books or watching YouTube videos or, looking online. Berkeley has a whole workbook. It's by Jimmy Kachulis. And Jimmy Kachulis, it's called the Harmony Workshop. And it's a book that you can order on Amazon. It kind of goes step by step and shows you, what these different chords sound like, what the different scales sound like. It has links so you can actually go and listen to song examples. He did one for melody as well. So I would suggest getting melody and harmony and using those as kind of a study guide as you learn songwriting as well. The final color that we're going to go to is blues. And this is a great example of just a straight up blues song, and it's Tracy Chapman, Give Me One Reason. So definitely straight down the middle blues, those 7 chords, just everything just oozes with blues there. So that's a great example, and something that you can listen to on your own as well. So now a lot of you had asked about kind of how you can think about some of these modes. So this is a chart, and I can send this out to the meetup, to those of you who had RSVP'd to this, so you can have a copy of this presentation, so you can have this. But I just got this off of line. I just Googled it. I just Googled like modes chart. And this shows you in the key of C, it shows you what notes are in that mode. So basically each mode starts on a different degree. So as you can see, it's really just about shifting the scale over by 1 degree for each mode. This chart actually shows you too what kind of sound the mode has, and then also common chords and a chord progression that shows up within the mode. So for instance, on the Mixolydian, it's showing that G down to the F. And then it shows you that the scale starts on G and then goes to G, and it's in the same key signature as C major. So there's no sharps, no flats. Danny in the chat asked if the Tracy Chapman song is a 12-bar blues sequence. I think it is. I haven't analyzed it closely to see if it is 12 bars, but more than likely it probably is. Also, here's another chart that I had found on Google just by Googling. It shows you, if you start on the different degrees of the scale, what mode it would be in. And one of the modes that we didn't talk about is Locrian. Locrian is really a dark and kind of weird mode that you don't see a lot in commercial music, but you do sometimes see it in like really heavy, like dirty type like funk songs. Like Janet Jackson, What Have You Done For Me Lately is kind of in a Locrian mode. Leslie says, is Chapman a minor blues? Yes. So it's in, I think it's like E flat minor blues, I think. So hopefully these charts can help you see kind of visually what we're talking about when we're talking about a mode. And I know, Adam, you had mentioned that you kind of think about this in a way that helps you. Do you want to share kind of how you think about modes?
Yeah, I'll try. I mean, just to be clear, everyone that doesn't understand this, I've been a musician since I was 10. I don't think I understood modes until I was like 35. And I took jazz guitar lessons too. So when I'm figuring out like what key a song is in, the melody to me is the biggest indicator. Whatever I guess the most prominent chord doesn't necessarily mean the first chord or even last chord of a song, but whatever chord seems to, like, more than any other chord that's in the song, define the song. To me, that's, I guess it's home base, and it's all context. So like, when I first learned modes, I was like, well, if D Dorian is just C major and E Phrygian is just C major, why not just call it C major? So if a song, this is the way I think of it. If a song is like very much grounded in D minor, but it uses the notes of the key of C major, it's D Dorian de facto. One great example that I always use, and also because I just think it's one of the dopest songs ever written. So Eleanor Rigby, when Paul does that, that's all over in E minor, but it's in E minor in the key of, hold on here, D major. So
it's yeah. So
yeah, go
Dorian.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Chad. Yeah, right. So it's E Dorian. Just for that, no, I'm not wearing a man bun. Oh, sorry, CJ just private messaged me here. Love you. So for one moment though, Paul slips into E Phrygian because the phrase directly following that, I'm way outside the key. So right there, if you all want to like pick that out later and hear how and see it on your instrument, that just for that one moment he slips into it's E minor, but it's in the key of C, so it's E Phrygian. Did any of that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No,
I see one head shaking, so that's good enough. All right, cool. This stuff is, I don't envy you, Chad, at all, because like I said, everyone, it took me 25 years to understand it.
Well, I think what you're saying, Adam, is like, yes, E Phrygian is basically an E minor. It's different than E minor because in E Phrygian, the second note is not flatted. Do you know what I mean? Like but what Adam is saying is like, you're playing in a key signature. So there's a difference between your mode and a key signature, right? So the E Phrygian mode has the same key signature as C major, if that makes sense. And the chords that you start with and the chords that you go to in a section actually do define what mode you're in. And to get really deep, and we're not going to even like touch on this, but Berkeley teaches this, you can have your melody in one mode and your harmony in another mode. So you could have a E Phrygian melody in a G Mixolydian harmonic mode. And it's a way that you can experiment with sounds and emotions because, look at all the millions of songs out there, and all these songs create these different colors and emotions. And there's really only 12 notes that we use total, right? Like So how do we get all of these different things and colors out of just a small number of notes? It's starting to think in these modes and different things like this as well. So the thing that I want you to leave with is not like, oh my God, this is complicated, my mind is about to explode. The starting place to experiment with modes is pick whatever key you're in. Let's say you always play in G, right? Maybe that matches your voice. Maybe you know the chords on the guitar. Pick that key signature, but start on different degrees of the scale. So don't start on the G chord. And then maybe don't start on the C or the D chord in your next song. Like start on a different chord that's in the key, because that means you're playing in a different mode. And you don't have to know what mode you're in. You just have to know how it feels to you and how you apply that to your song. So don't overthink it. Like I said, I don't want to go super into the theory part because it does start to, it's really heady, and it's really, all of this all comes down to what sounds cool and does it communicate an emotion. CJ, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. So I hope I don't sound like an idiot, but what I'm trying to figure out is like the blues scale, those notes are chosen differently than the notes that you choose when you create a scale for a major scale, right? So a blues scale is not created the same way as a major scale. And I'm guessing that a minor scale is not created by selecting the same series of notes that you use to create a major scale. Is that correct or not correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the thing that's probably going to confuse everybody now is the blues scale is actually not a mode. The blues scale is actually a type of scale. So there's hundreds of different types of scales that use different sets of notes. So what you're saying is correct, CJ, is that the blues scale, it has different notes that are, and the best way to learn is to just look up the scales online.
Okay.
Like there's a gypsy scale that has like, it's like,
wow.
or
Okay.
so that's, and there's different cultures use different scales. You know, you can just kind of look them up online and sort of learn them in different ways. But yeah.
And so then when you go to create the modes, you're just taking a major, you're starting with a major, a major scale place, and then you're moving up a degree. So if you were using the C major scale, you would start with the second degree.
Correct. If you were wanting to play D Dorian, so if you were like, I'm playing in the key of C,
I see.
But I want the color to be Dorian, I would just use that. I would start on the D minor then.
Right, got it. And then, and you would use the same chord creation pattern that you would use for the C scale, but you're just a degree advanced.
Yeah, I mean, your chords are still the same triads, if that's what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that, but that's a very good catch, because I do confuse that a lot. I'm saying when you create what the chords are going to be in a D Dorian, when you're creating what the chords are going to be, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 diminished, you're going to use the same pattern that you would use for a C major, but you're just 1 degree advanced.
Yes, I think
so
that's
your one
correct.
chord would be the D Dorian, and then the 2 chord would be the E something or whatever.
E minor, yep.
E minor, right? Okay, I got it. Okay.
So like a Dorian song is Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. The dude.
Oh,
because that's just D minor to E minor to F to E minor. So that gives you that doot, 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 doot.
Cool. Very interesting.
So that's in Dorian. And that's the thing about Quincy Jones is Michael Jackson songs are a lot of times in different modes as well, because Quincy Jones was a trained jazz musician who actually went to Berklee, and he incorporated those jazz concepts and those modes into pop music. And that's what gives us, basically, Michael Jackson music is jazz with a kind of a rock or almost more like a disco beat underneath of it. So it
Yeah,
combines
very
the
nice.
harmonics of jazz with more of a groove.
Makes it more interesting. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, so Danny says, what does 1 degree advanced be? In Dorian, would the chords corresponding to the Phrygian and Mixolydian modes have subdominant function? They do have different functions, but I think in this context, you don't have to necessarily think about that. But you do, in order for it to establish the mode, you would have to hit on a chord that contains the notes that are in that mode. So if I played D minor and then I went to F and then I went to C, technically we're in D minor because that all of those chords are in D minor. It doesn't become Dorian until we hit that E minor. So you can also trick your listener into thinking you're in a different mode and then throw in the chord that sort of makes it that mode later on. So it gives you that kind of surprise feeling. So like a D minor chord progression, let's say we did the a D minor to F to C. So that sounds very stable in the D minor mode. But now if I throw in later after that C chord, I'm going to throw in that E minor. Now all of a sudden that gives us that Dorian feel. So it was a false like sense of being in D minor, but when you throw in that sort of signature chord, it makes it sound Dorian. But this is stuff, like Adam said, that takes people like years to figure out, to understand. The application of this is really experimentation and looking up chord progressions online that are in a mode. Whoops.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Kachulis.
And good transition here, because talking about modes and how you apply them to a melody, those of you who are, and I know that Adam was really talking about Eleanor Rigby, so talking about the Beatles, Jimmy talks about using different modes to hear how a Beatles song would sound had they used different modes. So another great example that hopefully puts some of it into perspective for you guys. Moving through, and I know that we probably just have a little bit of time left, but there's really 2 types of tools that you have as you think about your chord progression. So let's say you do have a chord progression. There's 2 areas that you can experiment with. You can experiment with the rhythm of the chords, and you can experiment with the pitch of the chord progressions as well. And if you notice, rhythm and pitch are the same ingredients that go into melody as well. So tools for rhythm variation within your chord progression. You can change the length of the progression, which means what is the number of bars? So is your chord progression 4 bars? Is it 2 bars? Is it 8 bars? You can change the rhythm of one or more of the chords. And when we say the rhythm here, we're talking about like the amount of chords that are happening within a measure. So do you have 1 chord per measure? Do you have 2 chords per measure? Is it 1 chord every 2 measures? You can also change the order of the chords. You can change how the chords are performed rhythmically. So are you playing, a pattern that's mostly quarter notes? Is it 8th notes, 16th notes? What's the groove? And then obviously the number of chords that you have within your progression can be changed as well. From common rhythm of chords, like I already mentioned, a lot of times there's 1 chord per bar. Sometimes there's 2 chords per bar. 1 chord per 2 bars. Those are some options that you have. So pitch variation within chords, you can subtract chords from your progression, you can add chords, you can replace a chord, you can add a melodic idea like a pedal. So what that means is, like, if you're playing chords, a pedal would be having like one note in the bass. So if you were going to do like a 1, 4, 5 progression, but you had the root note in the base of all those chords, a pedal would sound like this. Which would be in contrast to playing the root of each of those chords. You can also borrow chords from other keys. So you can have that, you can borrow chords from, like, let's say you're playing in C major, you could borrow chords from the C minor key and add different colors. So what would that sound like? So if we were in, let's say we have a 1, 4, 5, but we wanted to replace the 4 and borrow that chord from a C minor scale, you would have the 1, whoops. So borrowing chords from different scales is something that you have as an option as well. And then you can also use extensions, which extensions are where you're adding like a 7th or a 9 or an 11th or a 13th. Those are the degrees of the scale. So if you had like a major 7, or a major 7 would, so that's extending the chord by adding that 7. So that's one way that you can change pitch too. John Paul in the chat says, just want to share Berklee has an online virtual piano. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, Berklee, like I said, they are the top of the line when it comes to learning stuff. So anything that you can do to take their courses, do it. Another thing, so you're not overthinking any of this, is you can't copyright chord progressions. So a great place to start writing songs is literally use the chords from songs that you like. Like, just take the chord progression. You could play it, in the same order. You could play it in the same rhythm. Like, all of that you can do. But then once you start to know what progressions work, then you can start experimenting. Like, what happens if I move some chords around? Or what happens if I play them in a different order? Like, what does that sound like? And honestly, when you start looking into a lot of hit songs, a lot of songs have the same exact chord progression. And I know a lot of people, like, if you watch the Access of Awesome videos online where they show you all of the hit songs that have the exact same chord progression, people sometimes like poo-poo on that and make it seem like, oh, if your song uses the same chord, somehow it's not as good. No, it's like, do you go to an Italian restaurant and be like, I don't want noodles? Like, noodles work, right? Like, use what works. And what sets your song apart is not the chord progression. What sets your song apart is the melody and the lyric. So don't be afraid to just use chords from other songs. It will open, it'll open up a lot of avenues for you. So another tool that you can use to know what chords are within any given key signature is by using the circle of fifths. So some of you have probably heard of the circle of fifths. It's a great tool. So the best way that I use it to kind of think about songwriting is you have the outer ring, which establishes what major key you're in. So if we're in C major, this then will tell you what your 1, 4, and 5 are. So to the left of the C is the 4, and to the right is the 5. So you have the F is the 4, G is the 5. The 6 is always right below, and this would be the relative minor. So this tells you that C major is actually A minor. And then you have the 2 and the 3. So this tells you these 6 chords, the C, F, G, D minor, A minor, and E minor, are the most commonly used and most useful chords within the key of C. And you can work your way around the circle, and it's the same for no matter what key you're in. So if you wanted to say like, oh, we're playing in A, what chords should I use to write songs? You know that you can use D, E, F sharp minor, B minor, and C sharp minor. So it's a great way to remember what chords are in a scale. Also, if you are looking at a piece of sheet music and like, let's say there's sharps and flats and you're trying to figure out, well, what key is that? This wheel can help you determine that as well. So C has no sharps or flats. If you go clockwise, it adds sharps as you go around. So 1 sharp is G, 2 sharps is D, 3 sharps is A, 4 sharps is E, 5 sharps is B, 6 sharps would be like F sharp. And it does the opposite going flats when you go counterclockwise. So 1 flat is the key of F, 2 flats is B flat, 3 flats is E flat, and so on. So this is a great kind of tool that gives you a sense of what chords are available and helps you determine keys as well. So that's pretty much all that I have prepared for today. So I know we covered a ton of stuff. Do you feel like this is something that you'll experiment with or add to your own songwriting, or kind of how are you feeling after having all of this thrown at you in a short amount of time? Leslie?
I've learned so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm definitely going to be using the tools, especially the charts for the chord progression. I really wanted to learn about that, and you provided, I think, as much information as possible. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming, and you're welcome. Hopefully it does help you. And Leslie, you said that your mind was blown a little bit, so it's a lot.
It reinforced a lot of things from some music theory classes that I had. So I felt like I was able to follow most of this, which was very comforting. But it also, I guess it does feel in some ways a little bit overwhelming because there's so many choices. So, but I think modes would be something really fun to experiment with. So, and I was like in some ways trying to catch up to try to remember, okay, what's the difference between, what's flatted in Dorian or, so I was getting a little bit overwhelmed with that of it.
That takes a while. What's that?
I think those charts that, especially that one that you said you were going to email, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. So, obviously this stuff it's probably not going to click right away, but the more you kind of experiment, I think you'll start to just at least have enough of an understanding to where you can be dangerous, because most people, when they're listening, and most people aren't saying like, oh, well, you're not technically in Dorian because you use this chord or whatever. I think the idea from like how you take this and use it as quickly as possible is kind of what Adam said in the chat, where he said it's the importance of setting a mood. And I think a lot of us get stuck in writing either in a major or a minor scale. And that means we're basically writing in 2 colors when we have, other options available to us that might be a better way to do it. So, and then CJ asks, is there a book that kind of covers this? Yeah, any of the books by Jimmy Kachulis, especially the harmony workbook that Berkeley puts out, that's one that is definitely awesome. And chapter by chapter, it kind of breaks this down and kind of has it in bite-sized chunks. I would definitely look into that. Let me think of other books. Honestly, the Berkeley ones are probably the most easy to understand because it's broken down in an educational way that's not ultra academic. If you went to other colleges, they would be super deep into a lot of other like classical theory and things, where Berkeley is a little bit more gauged towards kind of what most of us are doing, I think, more of a singer-songwriter type of a thing. So definitely check out the Jimmy Kachulis books for sure. Ron, you had your hand raised.
Comment that, I really enjoy this stuff. I know I've read a lot of books, I've watched a lot of videos, and I've been studying this stuff for a couple of years now, and I hear the same thing over, but sometimes the fourth, fifth, sixth time it finally clicks. So, I mean, if a lot of you are out there like me, I've heard this, I still don't understand it. Persistence is key.
Yeah. And yeah, totally. And it just comes with time where you kind of start to think, well, that's how they got this type of sound. And here's the thing, you don't have to know what it's called if it sounds cool, right? The idea is experiment, and if it sounds cool, do it. Like I have a lot of people ask me, like, am I doing this right? And it's like, if you're doing it, you're doing it right. But is it getting the result that you want? Then if the answer is no, then you have to figure out why. Because then, what can you try then? You know what I mean? So yeah, that's key. Brian, you had your hand raised as well.
Yeah. So I don't want to open up a can of worms, but whenever you're starting on the 5 chord, where else do you have to go, man?
You can go anywhere. I mean, you could go to any chord within that scale, or you could go to any chord period, right? You could even you could modulate and go to different scales.
Oh, okay. All
but
right.
most of the time you're going to be playing in a key, right? So you would go to another chord within that key.
Right. Okay.
Again, it all comes down to what sort of feeling you want that to have, right? So if you're starting on the 5 chord, like if we're in C, if we're starting on G, that, like, we could go down to the F. That's probably the most common place that someone may go. But what if we decided we're going to go from the G down to the D minor? That has a different sound to it.
Yeah.
So like, and if you sing on that root, the G, like let's say the song is I Don't Want You to Leave Me. So I don't want you to leave me. Go to the F. I don't want you to leave me. Same note, but that has a different feel than I don't want you to leave me. I don't want. That's too low. I don't know if you can hear it. I don't want you to leave me. Ooh. But what if we went from the G to the C? That might sound different too. I don't want you to leave me. I don't want you to leave me. So it's really experimenting with what are you trying to say and what are those emotions.
Right.
And Adam said, Don't Think I Don't Think About It by Darius Rucker. Yeah, that's a song that is in Mixolydian that Clay Mills wrote that starts on the 5 chord.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah, so that's it for today. Any other questions or thoughts before we wrap up here today? Awesome. Well, I appreciate all of you joining. The next workshop is September 17th, and that is going to be about top lining, which I'm sure some of you have heard the term top lining, or you've heard people are top liners. Really what that means is you're writing to existing music recording. So you're coming up with a melody and lyrics to an existing music track or an existing chord progression, which a lot of us are top lining our own songs. But a lot of times it means we're writing, as CJ says, writing to tracks as well. So we've got some different, and top lining is a way that a lot of hit songs are written today. So we'll hear from some hit writers and things on how to do that. So join us September 17th, and then I'll send out a link to this through the meetup group so you can watch this video again, and I'll try to attach the a link to the presentation as well. So thanks everybody. Have a good rest of the day, and hopefully I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.